All right. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Our Life Beginnings and Always, Baxter's Root. It has been a while since the last time that I recorded for this series. I recorded a lot of videos in advance, and so I've had like a month's worth of content that I was just kind of waiting to pass, but we are back here in the game now, and I am excited to play more. I've been really missing this game, so let's just hop right into it, right? Just like that, the ceremony was over, and it was time to start the party. As the guests began to migrate, the staff hung back, already beginning to rearrange the space. Chairs were being stacked and wheeled over to the reception area, ready for dinner.
Take care.
You go ahead and enjoy yourselves. I'll take care of things here. Baxter excused himself to assist with the preparation, disappearing into the crowd and leaving you, Miranda, Cove, and Terry to mingle with the other guests. No sooner had you lost sight of him than you spotted the men of the hour wading through the mass of guests, hands clasped triumphantly between them. Their progress was rather slow. Everyone and their mom wanted a handshake. Eventually they made it over to where your little group was standing. Scott was bouncing on the balls of his feet, lighter than air. Jude was his usual grounded self, but you could tell he was ecstatic. He raised his hand in a casual wave. Yo. Hey guys. Honestly, my first thought is return the wave. Congrats? Scott's radiant expression could have powered all of California for a year.
Thank you so much.
It's been hard to keep myself together. I'm just so... He scrunched up his face and squeezed his arms in tight, as if to clamp down on the powerful, nameless emotion welling up inside him. You understood, even if he couldn't find the word for it. Jude, with one arm still entwined with Scott's, reached over with his free hand and tapped you on the shoulder. Hey, this wouldn't have been the same without you. Thanks.
I appreciate this.
You can say that again. Thank you so much for your help. Take some time to relax and enjoy the reception, okay?
You earned it.
Thanks. It was worth it. Anything for a good party, right? The pair of them grinned in unison before once more being swept up in the tide of well-wishers and distant relations. For an instant, you were left twiddling your thumbs along with the others. You took a moment to survey your surroundings for lack of anything better to do. In a far corner of the room, you spotted a conspicuous figure flitting about. A grim-faced lady holding a camera. Is this the same as the grim-faced teenager who was at Miranda's party? And then her 19th birthday party, wasn't that same person there too? You recognized her easily. She'd been at every single Eckert family event for the last decade or more, dutifully documenting the event for posterity. Was she always a photographer? Maybe we're thinking about different people. You would have put money on her having been there when Miranda and Jude were born, in fact. It was hard to imagine her missing any significant occasion. You were relieved she could make it. Eventually, Scott and Jude had hugged, kissed, or shaken hands with the majority of their guests. Meanwhile, the staff were beginning to clear a large empty space in the middle of the room, easing the crowd to the walls to uncover the central floor. With cautious steps, Scott and Jude made their way onto the dance floor, two lone figures. They took their positions as the noise of the guests faded to silence. You saw Jude leaning close to his husband, whispering something in his ear. Scott grinned, their eyes met, and the music played. It started off slow with a measured, even tempo. The couple began to move in unison, easing into the dance carefully, their toes testing the floor as one might the surface of a frozen pond. Y'all think you're gonna fall in? As the beat began to pick up, though, they quickly settled into a polished, practiced routine. Nice, good job, Baxter. To your left, Terry sucked in an impressed gasp. He wasn't the only one to give his approval. As the couple spun steadily around the space, there were encouraging whoops and smatterings of applause. You could hardly believe those were the same people who, only a few days prior, would have sworn on their own lives that this was an impossible feat. And now they were taking turns dipping each other to cheers, barely able to contain their joy. From across the room, you noticed Baxter watching, with a gentle, heartfelt expression on his face. You detected a hint of satisfaction. He was unabashedly proud of his students. You thought his eyes flicked aside to meet yours, although that might have just been a trick of the light, the setting sun casting strange shadows. Either way, his features remained unaltered, tender. As the music came to a delicate finish, Scott and Jude maintained their final pose for a second or two before embracing, to more acclaim from the onlookers. Scott held Jude's head in both his hands, leaning in for a kiss, extra cheering from Terry, who averted his eyes a little bashfully. He'd always been the type to get flustered over PDA. Bitch, me too, the fuck? The lovebirds took their bows and were then rushed off to take more photos. Now that the first dance was taken care of, the next order of business was arguably the most important. Food! Terry's voice was easily audible over the growing din of guests milling about once more. In an instant, he was gone, vanished in the direction of the appetizers. There was a green blur at the edge of your peripheral vision. You looked over to find Cove, or rather the empty spot where he had been standing mere moments ago. Nothing was more reliable than Cove's response to what Miranda had once dubbed the F-bomb. That boy must have had hollow legs. Maybe that was what made him so buoyant. You exchanged amused glances with Randy before she shrugged and followed along behind the two boys. Might as well. It was going to be a close call if you knew your friends. Damn, they're gonna eat the entire table full of appetizers? There had been a hungry, hungry look in Terry's eyes as he dashed past. You gravitated in the direction of the snack table, following along in the wake of your friends. Most of the other congregants were taking this opportunity for more socializing, with some handfuls breaking away to grab a morsel to munch on while they waited. It was easy to hook back up with your friends nearby, though admittedly that was never difficult even at the worst of times. You just had to walk in the direction of an elevated pair of blue eyes. As soon as you caught up to them, Cove was passing you a small delicacy of some description. Okay.
Hey!
You should really try this. It's good. What is it? Thanks. You took whatever it was and popped it in your mouth, giving a thumbs up of appreciation. He'd been right. You immediately leant over the table and grabbed another. I don't know how to really say that. So good. You know, my mouth's not full. The four of you hung around the horse divorce for a while, swapping stories and reminiscing about the places you'd seen some of the other guests. Terry was, with some small degree of pride, recounting the names of Miranda's relatives, nice, as they flitted in and out of view. Many of them stopped by to say hello, which was sweet to watch. It was evident that many in Miranda's family already considered Terry to be one of their own, and it didn't escape your notice that Randy was on the receiving end of several meaningful looks. Randy, for her part, was doing an exceptional job of pretending not to notice any of them. She could be very unflappable when the situation demanded. Before you and your friends could totally wipe out the snack table, there was the tinkling sound of a bell being rung, which came from the direction of the dining area. This was a signal for everyone to take their places for the main course, presumably. Your little group hurried on over, joining the mass of guests crowded around the tables. Everyone's designated seat was marked with a name card, written in flowing golden ink. You spotted yours quickly. You and your friends were near the head table. Once the momentary fuss of the seating arrangements was dispensed with, the meal followed along in very short order. A small squadron of waitstaff began to set large plates in front of the guests. each laden with food, giving off a faint wisp of steam. Ooh, fresh. If memory served, the options were, I don't know what that is, chicken tagine? Beef steak, vegetarian ravioli, and a vegan risotto. In actuality, you had paid very little attention to the main course, your mind being elsewhere. The main was naturally a precursor of what Cove would have described as the most important course of all, dessert. On this occasion, you had to agree with him. You wolfed down your meal with a sense of growing excitement, hardly able to stop yourself from peeking over to the top table every now and again. The tiered wedding cake, Xavier's masterpiece, stood resplendent at one end of Jude and Scott's table, and next to it, hidden under an unassuming silver cloche. How would it be received? What would Scott think? In your anticipation, you were finding it hard to sit still. It didn't escape Cove's notice that something was up. Halfway through eating, there was a gentle nudge at your elbow. He was looking at you, quizzically.
Are you okay?
Absolutely not. He was genuinely concerned, which was both very sweet and rather funny. You flashed him a quick smile and waved it away, not wanting to risk being overheard. During the ceremony and throughout the meal, Baxter had flitted from corner to corner of the room with the delicacy of a honeybee, his presence unassuming and unnoticed by all present, except you. As the main course was being cleared, however, he tapped a fork against the side of a wine glass, the clear sound reverberating off the tiled floors and quieting the diners' discussions. Honored guests, I hope the food and drink has been to your satisfaction. There were some non-specific noises of concurrence from the various tables. You glanced at Terry, who was patting his stomach contentedly, then at Miranda, still nibbling away at a piece of bread.
Glad to hear it.
We've come to the part of the evening where the newlyweds will cut the traditional first slices of their wedding cake. Scott, Jude, if you'd like to... The sound of two chairs scraping against the floor drowned out the rest of what he said. Scott and Jude got to their feet and came around from behind the top table. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder in front of the tiered cake, a large steel knife clutched in Scott's right hand. Jude's left rested over the top, his wedding band winking in the candlelight. There was a momentary pause as the dour-faced photographer performed her solemn, at least to her, duty, and then, with relatively little actual ceremony, the first clean cuts were made. The couple apportioned a slice apiece, and, as promised, there was no smushing of cake into anyone's face. A round of applause rippled around the tables as the first bites were taken, and then a bustling sound as people started getting up to form a queue. Scott was limbering up to carve slices for everybody when Jude tugged at his sleeve and stopped him with a word. He gestured to the silver cover, still hiding whatever was underneath. Sensing that there was more to come, the guest piped down again. When Scott reached over and finally lifted the top to reveal the groom's cake in all its glory, there were several soft gasps. One of these was from Scott himself, whose face was blown wide. His face was blown wide with surprise and delight. He smiled, open-mouthed, looking silently to his husband and back down at the controller cake. There it is! You felt a warm, fuzzy feeling spread throughout your body as Scott began to whisper rapidly in Jude's ear, likely interrogating him about what was going on and where the cake had come from. It was too far away for you to tell what he said, but you didn't need to be in earshot to know that Scott was floored. You sagged in your seat with relief, your long night's effort vindicated. News of the groom's cake spread like a wave through the room, people murmuring excitedly to one another, with some approving nods and expressions of admiration thrown in. Thank you, thank you. At his husband's side, Jude was looking nowhere but at Scott's face, eyes filled with emotion. He wrapped an arm around Scott's waist, and they leaned into each other in a sidelong embrace. A fresh knife had been provided for the second cake, and Scott eagerly called the photographer back over to snap some fresh shots, both of the whole cake and then of them cutting it. This time, as the incision was made, Jude addressed the onlookers.
Seriously?
This is the last cake, I swear. Some laughter, and then the room devolved into chatter as people began lining up in front of the top table for their dessert. You and your friends, being close by, got there early. The couple were handing out the slices to everyone on little side plates. Jude took care of the tiered cake while Scott was still fawning over the bright red controller even as he cut into it. At the front of the line, you had the option of taking a slice of the chocolate vanilla tiered cake, the carrot cake of your own making, or, to Cove's delight, a piece of both. You went for... I feel like both is a lot. I feel like I wouldn't be able to do both. You know, that's just too much. But not in like a full way, but in a that's a lot of sugar sort of way. You know, that's a coma waiting to happen. That being said, I do like a good chocolate vanilla cake. I do also like carrot cake, and so it's like, ooh, which one do I want to do? I feel like I can make a carrot cake. You know, I made this one. I feel like I can make another one myself, you know? Whereas like a professional cake, we gotta try Xavier's. Oh, hey. That's what I'm having too. Doesn't it look so good? I know the decorations don't have anything to do with how it tastes, but it feels like it does. Then she stammered apologetically, flushing a little. I mean, that's not to say that your cake doesn't look nice too. You can tell a lot of hard work went into it, and Scott and Jude were both so happy with how it turned out. It was really kind of you to do that for them. Thank you. I just like chocolate cake. Okay, Randy. I like this one too. When everyone was in their seats again, you had an unexpected visitor. Baxter had squeezed his way past the line for dessert and over to your table. His hand hovered at the back of your chair. Sup? Hi. Hey. Cove's greeting was still stilted and awkward. There simply hadn't been time before for him to get used to Baxter's presence, and he was never quite used to it to begin with.
Hello.
It's been a while, Cove. Good evening, everyone. Are we enjoying ourselves? Your group exchanged glances amongst themselves as if to decide who would go first. Ish, knife? Cove swallowed his mouthful of cake and tried again.
It's nice.
Yeah. Miranda threw her hands in mock exasperation, her body language having become a lot more flamboyant ever since the wine she'd had with the main course. Don't worry, Baxter. I think it's the best wedding I've ever been to. Terry nodded along as she spoke, tilting his chair up on its hind legs with his arm draped over the back of it. You're gonna fall. It's been amazing. You brought your A game today, B-man. Baxter's eyes twinkled at the mention of his old moniker, and it looked like the professional here was suppressing a laugh to boot. Ooh, I'm afraid that joke gets a C-, Terry. Hey! No, but seriously, man, it's been a blast. That's what, 2 successful events you've organized for Miranda's family already? You should become the official party planner for the Eckerts.
Yeah.
That would work. At least I know who to come to when Terry and I, need help. Exactly. Wait a minute. The front legs of Terry's chair hit the floor with a thunk. At least it's the front. I was worried you were gonna go backwards. As Miranda waited for her boyfriend's brain to catch up with the conversation, she reached for her glass and took another swig of wine. Terry looked like he was trying to solve an extremely difficult mental math problem, all power of language having evaporated. Miranda simply patted his leg, looked into his eyes, and smiled sweetly. You let out a silent shout in your head, not wanting to interrupt whatever moment the two were now having. Ah! Miranda hadn't proposed at her brother's wedding, but it was a heck of a hint. Baxter put a finger thoughtfully to his lips, fighting to hide the way the corners of his mouth were curling upwards. Perhaps I could consider introducing a loyalty card system. I certainly appreciate a returning customer. Miranda had now laced her fingers together with Terry's, who was still unresponsive to external stimuli. Cove giggled and leaned in to speak quietly to you. What was that laugh? I wasn't here for a week. What happened? A lot. You didn't get a chance to elaborate. Baxter, Kit, I was looking for you. I know what you did. Scott had a healthy flush to his face, his eyes bright and enthusiastic. It didn't match the almost sinister choice of words. Jude appeared at his husband's right elbow. You made that cake?
Yep.
Last night. Scott's eyebrows and voice rose in unison, his tone modulating a few octaves upwards in incredulousness.
What?
Last night? You can't be serious. What were you thinking? You and Baxter nearly fell over each other trying to assure Scott that it hadn't been too much trouble, that you'd volunteered your time, and besides, you were both old hands at baking by now. Out of the corner of your eye, you noticed Cove paying attention, a look of comprehension dawning on his face. The source of your earlier agitation had finally been revealed. With enough reassurance from the pair of you, Scott's concern was mollified enough for him to round his way back to thanking you again. It was a highlight of the day, honestly.
That's wonderful.
You're too kind, Scott. It's been more than worthwhile. As long as you're satisfied, I couldn't be happier. Anything for our special boys, damn. Thanks. It was just perfect. The cake, the ceremony. His voice was getting strained with emotion, and he broke off in favor of taking Jude's hand again. We won't forget it, right, Grant? A vigorous shake of the head from Grant. Cool. Well, here Jude reached over and clapped a hand to Baxter's shoulder.
We owe you.
For real, you made this happen. Thank you. Thank you all. There was another round of your welcomes, and don't mention it, before Baxter made his excuses and promptly vanished. Jude watched him leave, arms folded.
No clue.
I don't get that, dude. He's got a head for dealing with stuff. He handled me and Scott's issues. Why can't he do it for himself? Damn, Jude. You, Cove, Miranda, and Terry all swapped a series of silent sidelong looks. For having only known Baxter a week, Jude's perception was uncannily accurate. What could you even say in rebuttal? Jude didn't pay you any mind, nor did he retract his statement. He merely shrugged with one shoulder, the fingers of his hands splaying out in a universal, well, whatever, kind of gesture. Damn! That's cute. I'm not gonna say it, but that's cute. He's better than he used to be. If he was 5 years younger, he probably would have left the state to avoid me. Sounds about right. Jude gave his wedding reception a glance with new eyes. We should go. The real dancing started and he owes me a rematch. Scott tutted, cocking his hip. Not gonna make a difference, Jude, but I'll humor you since it's your wedding day. It's your wedding day, too. Those two had made a game, a competitive one at that, even out of dancing together. No one would get in the way of that. The couple joyfully made a break for the dance floor, hand in hand. After a second or so, Miranda wiped a few chocolate cake crumbs from around her mouth and got to her feet, holding out her hand to Terry.
So...
You know, we could dance, too. Terry placed his palm on top of Miranda's and sprang out of his seat. Yeah, let's show those clowns what 10 years of birthday parties looks like. How about you, Cove? The pair of them turned their puppy dog eyes over to Cove, who was somehow still chewing. He shook his head and swallowed.
Don't worry about it.
I'm good. I'll stay here and watch, if that's okay. Sure. Kit? I'm staying here too. You two have fun, though. Okay, cheer us on. They ran off to join the center of the space, leaving you and Cove to chill. You slouched in your seat, letting the chair take all your weight as you performed a full-body sag. It was times like those when you were grateful that someone, somewhere, had invented the age-old art of sitting down. Across the room, you watched Terry and Miranda approach the grooms as the initial riff of a modern club hit started to play in the background. Even from your vantage point, it became apparent that Scott was still very much out of his element when it came to dancing. Baxter's tutelage could only get him so far, and besides, that had been a totally different style and genre. Meanwhile, Terry and Miranda and Jude had been to enough parties and clubs over the years that they had some tricks up their pant legs and skirt bottom. Your two friends shimmied about the room with abandon, then Scott and Jude canoodled to a slow blues number. Whoever chose the music had obviously known their audience. In this glass palace on top of the world, the people celebrated the evening away. A few early stars, like curious children, began to poke their heads out, interesting. The time moved for you in strange increments, moments and colors running together like globs of paint. You counted the minutes by the measure of jazz chords and camera flashes and laughter. You remembered looking around for him at times. Him. Trying to catch a glimpse through the shifting mass of bodies, eyes peeled for that telltale mop of grayish black. Don't call it gray, he's gonna get angry. But try as you did, Baxter Ward was visible only in short snatches. The back of his head over someone's shoulder, half a face turned to speak to a colleague, a pair of eyes reflected in a window. Ooh, creepy. His presence was like a wisp of insubstantial smoke. He had become a shadow, easily forgotten, yet always there. Hours passed, until you were standing in the lobby with the others to send the couple off. It was funny, you thought. For the days of effort you'd put in, it was all over so quickly. Scott and Jude were doing the rounds one last time, expressing their heartfelt appreciation for people for coming. They hadn't stopped holding hands since the dancing began. A few moments later, and you were waving from the front steps as they got in a sparkling car and drove off. That splash of red sped away in an instant, carrying them to a new life together. The majority of the guests made themselves scarce shortly afterwards, heading down to the parking garage en masse or getting into taxis. You stayed behind, together with Scott and Jude's relations. The party portion of the party might have finished, but someone had to clean up afterwards. You leaned against the wall of the elevator on the way back up to the hall, half tired, half relieved. One good thing about the event being over was that you didn't have to worry about it anymore. The doors opened once again, and you stepped out into the wedding hall. Cove, Miranda, and Terry were at the dining tables, busy stripping them down.
Hey!
Over here. You were beckoned to join them, and soon you were scooping up garbage and folding tablecloths in earnest. It was almost a cliché at this point, but you once again found yourself recalling a similar occasion years before. It was just like when you stayed behind to clear up after Miranda's birthday party. It had felt the same way then, the strange mix of emptiness and satisfaction. Casting your eyes about the room, you realized that wasn't the only common thread. Like before, there was one member of your ragtag group who wasn't present. Baxter was down on the opposite end of the room, still rushing to and fro between various groups of staff, keeping himself occupied. You decided not to get in his way, not while he was busy. The moment would come eventually. Oh, I was really going to say, like, this one, maybe? Or this one's nice too. It would have made you sad to think he was being left out on picking up after the party? He's fine. I do kind of want to say that, though. You resigned yourself to waiting. The trouble was, it took a lot longer than you anticipated. Once all the trash had been cleared away, he had started vacuuming the floors. How did he find that? And when you finished with the decorations, he was in the middle of moving stacks of chairs over to the elevators. 1000%. He is just doing busy work so he doesn't have to talk to me. He passed close by as you were beginning to pack the wedding cakes. You called out to him, but all that you got was a perfunctory smile and a tilt of the head before he sped away again. Your heart sank as he turned back to what was left of the groom's cake, which you were slicing to pack into a storage container. Okay. You wouldn't ignore Baxter, but the same clearly wasn't true for him. He hadn't spoken to you since that one time during the reception. It couldn't be a coincidence. For some reason or another, he'd been avoiding all of you. Or maybe you, specifically. It was getting kind of ridiculous. There was almost nobody left in the room. By now it was you, Cove, Miranda, and Terry, some employees from the building itself, and Baxter. Everyone else had gone. Time was running out. If he left before you had a chance to speak, there was no knowing whether you'd get another. You might never see him again. You looked down at the cake that you made. The last evidence of your collaboration, maybe even your friendship, and you were cutting it to pieces and putting it away in a box. How symbolic. You carried on slicing, ruminating on this thought in silence. It was hard to say how you felt about it. Sure, you'd accepted this sort of behavior in the past, but now... Take a break? The sound of Miranda's voice pulled you out of your mental quagmire. You'd been so focused on Baxter's usual strangeness that you hadn't registered her talking. One look at the surprise on your face was enough for Randy to know you'd been a million miles away. She tapped the table in front of you. I can finish up here, Kit. You've been going for ages. And you were up all night, too. Her wide eyes were worried when you looked up into them, and there was a slight pinch in her forehead. Yeah, you should take it easy. Harry's head popped into view from behind Miranda, his expression of concern an exact replica of hers. It was so cute the way they had gradually taken on each other's mannerisms over the years. And leave something for Cove to do for once. He's gotta earn that 5th slice of cake. He's just gonna eat the entire cake. There was a yelp of indignation as, last but not least, Cove made his appearance over Terry's shoulder. The sight of the three of them lined up in height order like that was comical. Cove's face was a little pouty, his tone defensive. It wasn't like I didn't want to help out, Terry, and besides, it wouldn't be my 5th. It would be... let's see. He trailed off, his gaze drifting up and to one side as he silently counted on his fingers. As a unit, Terry and Miranda rolled their eyes. Seeming to realize his mistake, Cove dropped his hands. Anyway, they're right about the break, Kit. You can leave the rest to me, okay? Oh? At this, Miranda pulled a chair next to yours and sat down.
Wow.
Leave it all to you, Cove? That's so nice. Huh? Wow, thanks for offering, buddy. It's been such a long day after all. Harry stretched wide and made a ridiculously exaggerated yawning sound before plopping down onto Miranda's lap and putting an arm around her shoulder. They both grinned at Cove with all their teeth.
Hey!
I didn't mean that. Stifling a laugh, you got up to leave. Your friends were probably right. You needed to give the wedding work a rest. You had other things on your mind anyway. You nodded at Cove sympathetically as you headed for the far end of the wedding hall, in the direction of a certain someone. Bitch. For the past half hour or so, Baxter had visibly struggled to stay preoccupied. He's running out of things to do, loser. Almost nobody remained for him to give instructions to. There were no more chairs to stack or tables to clear. By now, he'd resorted to standing with his back turned and his arms folded, gazing out over the city through the enormous windows and trying his best to look deep in thought. You weren't fooled, though. It was about time you put him out of his misery. You approached from behind and softly called his name. Absolutely not. Yo, bitch. Baxter. They start with the same letter, to be fair. He stiffened at the sound, shoulders tensing. For a few seconds, he was frozen. Then, all at once, Baxter spun around to face you, that perennial smile fixed firmly in place. Good evening again, Kit. Is everything alright with the cleanup? Yep, not my problem anymore. You cleared your throat, shuffling a little on your feet. You'd been mulling over a plan of attack, so to speak, but now that it came down to it, you weren't convinced it was going to work. I don't know if you remember, but I promised once that I'd give you a call the next time there was a wedding going on. And, well, oh no. Here we are. Oh no. Oh no. Why did I say that? Baxter's eyes widened a fraction at this. Is that what we're calling this? His mouth gradually fell open. I see. It's good everything is in hand with respect to the tidying up. You've been a great help. That didn't bode well. Baxter was as amicable as ever, but his body language was closed off. His tone light, in a way you long ago learned was his way of establishing a sense of distance. You inched a little closer, expressing your intent to stay right where you were. This conversation wasn't over with a pleasantry. A slight hunch returned to his shoulders. Well, since I have you for a minute, I wanted to mention it earlier, but there wasn't a convenient moment.
Lovely.
Thanks. What the fuck? Your outfit. You look wonderful, Kit. You do really pull off a suit like a few people I've met. Bro, what the fuck? Though I guess it shouldn't be a surprise at this point. It was true years ago, and it even is... it's... He was talking quickly, his eyes never seeming to settle in one place for long. In spite of all the compliments, you found that it all washed over you without making much of an impression. More than anything, you were disappointed. Baxter was deflecting, and doing so in the only way he knew how. It might have been funny to you, once. I won't keep you any longer. I'm sure you'd appreciate a chance to relax after a tiring week. Before you could react, he was stepping away from the window. In an instant, he was in line with you. In another, he had passed. You knew how this whole song and dance went. He led you through it once before. You tried your hardest, but if Baxter wasn't willing to meet you halfway, then there was nothing to be done. He decided to walk on out on you yet again, step by measured step. And that is how the game ends. Sucks that we couldn't do anything with Baxter. And then, you heard a long, drawn-out exhale. Baxter had stopped after a few paces, his back to you. You saw a hand come up to pinch the bridge of his nose. The character development of just this in general, that you stopped? In general. I'm so proud of you. I don't care what happens next. I'm proud of you right now in this moment. Baxter turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder so his gaze met yours. You didn't say anything. You didn't dare to. Like he was a wild animal, at risk of being spooked. He closed his eyes for a few seconds and breathed. Good. Always important to breathe. In and out. You blinked, and then he was coming back in your direction, his face set in a determined expression. He stopped a few feet from where you stood, the heels of his dress shoes snapping together, okay?
I'm sorry.
You must think I'm avoiding you deliberately. You are. I know. You made a kind of hybrid shrugging and nodding gesture to indicate that, yeah, you'd gotten that feeling. It was hard to miss. He made a noise that was one part laugh, another part sigh. Of course, I am. My hope was that you wouldn't notice. What you don't know won't hurt you and all that. This is... Literally, I was about to go like this. Dead ass, I was about to do that. I'm gonna do it. I'm sorry. It was not my best idea. And since that plan is dashed, I wouldn't want you to get the wrong impression about why. It isn't your fault. No, I know it isn't. And I haven't forgotten everything that happened last night, okay?
It's...
only this highly specific situation that has reawakened my reticence, you might say. What about it? Baxter silently stared over the expansive city for a while, as if collecting his thoughts. Then he finally spoke to you. really spoke to you, as two people who knew each other with no pretenses in between. It's been hard not to feel nostalgic this past week. We've had quite a stroll down memory lane. Sometimes by happenstance, sometimes because I went out of my way to do so. I have fond memories of those days in Sunset Bird. Treasured memories. Like most treasures, they're things to be taken out and admired from time to time, and then put away again. Though some are too delicate for even that. They should never be touched. He was talking mostly to his shoes. Are they responding? His hands had snuck into his pockets in an uncharacteristically timid gesture.
Yes.
This evening is a reprise of something I never wished to relive. His voice was soft, plaintive. There was an ache in it. That party was wonderful. Party Planner Appreciation Party. I'm glad you still remember the title of it word for word, because I would not have unless it was written down again. Oh, he'd remembered it too. It had been so long since I'd known what it was like to be included, to be around people who refused to let you be left out, no matter how hard you try to weasel out of it. Terry, Miranda, and Cove were too kind, but it was your gestures specifically that are at the heart of this matter, of course. He laughed then, a nervous gasping thing, and pressed a hand instinctively to his chest.
Truthfully.
If you didn't ask me to dance again in the after hours of another event we helped create like you did then, it would have broken my heart. That would mean definitively that I lost what we had. Baxter's tone shook. His hand dropped to his side, where it balled into a fist. The air around you was very still. But if you did ask, it would be more painful, because that would mean... Baxter struggled to put his deepest feeling to words. The first attempt died off, but he squared his shoulders and forced himself to get it out. It would mean that even after everything, you hadn't let me go, that you accepted me still, that you always would have, that I should have believed that all along, that the only thing I've done was hurt you and myself of my own accord. There was a pain to his words that shocked you to hear. Though by now you would never have made the mistake of thinking he lacked emotion, Baxter still so rarely displayed this kind of naked vulnerability. Baxter tucked his face away from you. It's horrible. I didn't want to know one way or the other.
I'm sorry.
I'm fairly pathetic. You understand. You are. That truly was the core of it. Damn, even the game's saying it. Baxter is pathetic. He also couldn't let himself be happy no matter what. He was scared to hope and too ashamed of himself to try. I'm not gonna say it. I just want to know what his response is. In an alternate universe, I don't think he'd take it well, but in an alternate universe, I'm calling him pathetic. He didn't have anything to say. There was a brief pause. He's fucking crying. I wonder if we should go back. Maybe we shouldn't say that. Well, I'm still here, you have the answer. Probably gonna say the same thing, but he didn't have anything to say to that, but his brows pinched further. There was a brief pause, and then Baxter raised his head. There was a faint sheen to his eyes. He seemed to search your face for a while, like he was trying with all his might to glean your thoughts. After another heavy pause, he found more he wanted to tell you. You've always been understanding, excessively so, even. Whenever I look back on that summer in Sunset Bird, I'm stunned by the way I prioritize myself above all else. And yet here I am, making that same mistake. From the moment you walked into that restaurant, my actions were nothing but self-preservation and damage control, and occasionally reminiscing to an extent I was pleased with.
Yes.
I had a professional commitment not to let personal matters impede the work that needed to be done, but My distancing went far beyond that. In the end, I was using their marriage as an excuse. If not for that, then there would have been something else, some trivial reason for keeping you at arm's length that likely doesn't shock you. Damn! I pegged you. I've had bigger shocks from taking off a sweater. Shit. I'm not that smart that I would say that, but that is such a good line. Oh my goodness. I should have done better by you. Scoot and Jot. Alright guys, I'm going to bed. I'll see you later. Baxter's eyebrows lifted in the middle, a penitent expression. Sorry, I've got to contain myself. Okay, I'm sorry. I know this is a really big moment for you. Scoot and Jot really got me.
To be honest,
If you can still believe me, I hadn't intended for my behavior today to be quite as cruel as it must have come across. Oh yeah? I'm listening. Thank you. In the past, I spent every moment around other people thinking of the limited span of our acquaintance, as if I wasn't seeing them at all, only the imminent departure. Our arrangements fell in line with that. A clear time frame, limited from the outset, predetermined rules set in stone. That it was that way 5 years ago. It was that way now. We'd cooperate for a short period in service of Scott and Jude's wedding, and that would be that. I've said as much myself, more than once.
but
The problem is, as I only recently realized, he leaned in a little closer, his voice dipping in volume, letting you in on a secret. I forgot about that. Damn! Seeing the open incredulity on your face, Baxter gave a dry chuckle. You see, I thought, completely and earnestly, that I didn't need to speak with you now, here, when I was feeling so sensitive. We could simply pick up where we left off later tonight or tomorrow. The fact that we no longer had a reason to interact didn't come up as part of the consideration. What? This entire time you'd agonized over the idea that after this wedding he'd cut you off, and Baxter was there already imagining what the two of you might be doing next Tuesday? I know. Who would have guessed it was possible to retain a connection with someone, even with no limited set of circumstances to support it? Baxter laughed once, and it was real. But then he returned to utmost seriousness. I'm not going to simply vanish. Not again. We did it, gamers! I apologize for how stressful this was. I apologize for everything I've ever done to you. It's a little hard to approach what I've sowed over the years. Sowed? Sowed. I know the word, I just don't know how to pronounce it. So many mistakes. And even now, when I hope to make things right, to make things last, I'm forced to admit that I'm ignoring the reality of the situation. Baxter shook his head, ruefully. This doesn't come down to what I want at all. I don't have the right to put myself before you. I never did.
forgive me.
I know I'm rambling. The point is, if this is going to continue the way I've been silently picturing, I can't be shallow company. It was getting harder and harder to listen to Baxter talk about himself this way. Again, you recall your shared history. An evening spent listening to him pour his heart out over your dining room table. You wanted to interject, to contradict him. Regrets were one thing, but maybe he was taking the self-critique a little far. There was one thing that stopped you in your tracks, however. The words sticking in your throat. Right now, Baxter was being utterly sincere. He thought long and hard about this. And so, despite your misgivings, you held your tongue and waited. And on that front, there is some of my own advice which I should have followed a long time ago. When the time comes, don't pull away. You'll only regret it later. The words were out before you even noticed, the scene echoing in the back of your mind as you said it. Baxter blinked, startled. Then his features softened for the first time since you'd approached him.
Ah.
Exactly. How apt that was. Though honestly, I can't believe I had the audacity to say such a thing to another person, even if they were a fictional character. Still, in my ignorance, I had a point. My 19-year-old self had a few ideas worth keeping, and he had people he should have held on to as well. Baxter squared his jaw and dipped his chin, drawing himself up and looking at you, full in the face.
I don't want us to separate after today.
Wow. So there you have it. I would like to become your friend, or remain your friend. Today, tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, as long as you want. Next Tuesday. No more running away. I'll listen to whatever you have to say to me, even if it's difficult to hear. His mouth pulled up in a bashful little semi-smile, his posture open and vulnerable. There was an earnest, almost childlike aura of hope about him. As Baxter patiently waited your response, you mentally scrambled to make sense of how you felt. There was a lightness to everything, suddenly. Your whole body felt tingly. You'd done it. Somehow you reconnected with a man you thought you lost for good. And he wanted to be friends? You could nurse that flame of yours while still being friends. Oh man, once a piano-headed chump, always a piano-headed chump. Of course I want to be friends, Baxter. Baxter stood motionless, not even blinking. Gradually, like the sun tentatively peeking out after a storm, his eyes began to glow with unmistakable joy. And then, suddenly...
Honestly.
Excuse me, but can we take a moment to talk about what a poor insult that was? Baxter crossed his arms, his head tilted up and to the side with an air of scandal. A piano? Hardly a resemblance. There are so many better black and white things to choose from. As someone who might once have been considered an expert on all things monochrome, this has sat with me for years. That bartender was sorely lacking in creativity. The idea that Baxter had been holding a grudge for 5 years was simply too much. How could you do anything but laugh? At the sound, his scowl of annoyance melted seamlessly into an enormous grin.
I appreciate the understanding.
But honestly, I'm so happy you feel that way, Kit. To continue the reference, I think this must be how those characters felt by the end of the play. All their feelings out in the open, at last. I hadn't appreciated how something that seems like melodrama from the outside can be entirely different when you live through it. It can be understandable enough. Understandable doesn't mean preferable. Not meaning to throw any unnecessary shade so soon after Baxter's life-changing revelation, but come on, this had been the definition of painful drama. Baxter laughed, a hand coming up to cover his mouth. That is also true.
It's settled.
Regardless, our own story has a happy ending after all. Huzzah! That was a good way of putting it, he thought. It had taken 5 years and a Herculean amount of persistence, I don't know why I can't say that word, to push past Baxter's interpersonal issues, but you made it. He wasn't about to disappear off the face of the earth or cut you off without warning. You were friends again. Well, there was still that little corner of your heart that yearned for Baxter. You were simply overjoyed to be by his side. Fate had given you a second chance. You weren't about to squander it by being ungrateful. As you began to come down from the momentary high that this new development had caused, Baxter pointedly cleared his throat. Well then, my brilliant, lovely friend, if you're up for it, I have a proposition for you, okay? You know how I love propositions. Propose away. It's nothing too exciting, but Scott and Jude are off on their honeymoon now, and I'm not sure what your sleeping Hello? Excuse me? I'm not sure what your sleeping arrangements are for the rest of your time here.
I'm here if you need me.
If you'll be there alone, that sounds a tad lonely. What I'm saying is, if you haven't got any alternative plans, perhaps you'd like to keep rooming with me? The question was said with some hesitancy. He was bashful about asking. For what felt like the umpteenth time today, you couldn't quite believe what you'd heard. You want me to stay at your apartment? Yeah, at least until your return journey home. I'd feel awful if I didn't at least offer. It's fine, if not, but, well, if you do want to, I'd be delighted to have a host you. Baxter was right. Jude and Scott had said you'd be welcome to stay as long as you needed while they were away, but still, there was a small part of your brain that didn't want to let Baxter out of your sight for too long, just in case he vanished. And it wasn't as if you'd never spent the night there. Taking your thoughtfulness for hesitancy, Baxter piped back up again.
Of course.
It's more than okay if you'd find that more uncomfortable. We hadn't seen each other in years a week ago, and now I'm asking you to stay with me. Not wanting him to entertain that negative train of thought any longer than necessary, you hurried to let him know your thoughts. Are you kidding? Of course. I didn't even get a say! The resultant change in Baxter's demeanor was extraordinary. His eyes lit up, his cheeks dimpled, and you thought you could almost see his ears tweak. It's like watching a kitten. You're certain? I guess. You nodded reassuringly. When it made him this visibly excited, how could you possibly refuse?
That's wonderful.
I've invited a friend to come visit. Yippee. In that case, since there's no time like the present, why don't we go see how the others are doing with the last of the cleanup? We can let them know about our plans while we're at it. Okay, and I think with that, I am going to end this episode here. A lot that I wasn't expecting. What the hell is this ending? What? But, you know. It's Baxter. When do you possibly expect anything out of this man? What the hell? I'm shocked. I am flabbergasted. Okay, sure, we can go this route. Definitely not what I was expecting, but that's what we're going with. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. As I said at the beginning, I'm really enjoying playing it again. I just really like this game, and I hope that you are enjoying watching it, but I'm gonna go for now, end the episode here. So thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you next time for some more Our Life, Beginnings and Always, Baxter's Route.